Tips on Coping with Grief While Enrolled in College, presented by the University of North Georgia's Student Counseling Center. There are a variety of losses that can contribute to grief in the college setting. The situation that would come to mind most would be having someone close to you, whether a family member, friend, or pet, die while you're in college. Another situation would be you, or someone close to you, going through a divorce or separation. You may have a loved one who is diagnosed with a serious illness. You, or someone in your life, may have lost their job. Any losses or big changes can lead to grief. Let's talk about the difference between grief, bereavement, and mourning. Grief is the internal feeling you have when you experience a loss. The loss could be a loved one, a job, a friendship, a pet, a sense of safety, or even the loss of a home. Bereavement is the state of having experienced the loss. Bereavement is a period of mourning after a loss, especially after the death of a loved one. Mourning is how a person shows or expresses loss. This varies by culture. In many traditions, people wear black as a sign of mourning, but not in all cultures. For more information on different cultural traditions for grief and mourning, please watch our video, Grieving Customs. Many of you have probably heard of Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. Did you know that this has been expanded to 7 stages? The first stage was added later and is shock. This is a feeling of disbelief on hearing the news. Sometimes there's physical feelings of nausea, vomiting, increased heart rate, headaches, or difficulty sleeping. The next stage is denial. This is a stage of feeling helpless and doing things to avoid the inevitable. It's a time to adjust to the inevitable and to absorb what has happened in processing the reality. Denial also allows us to endure the emotional pain. The next stage is anger, in which you may experience emotional discomfort. The anger is a way to cover up feelings of fearfulness. Bargaining is the next stage, and it gives us a perceived sense of control over something we can't really control. In the case of a loved one with a terminal illness, we might plead with a higher power and say that we will change if only the loved one stays alive. A person may have regrets about personal faults or times when they felt disconnected from the deceased or hurt their feelings. The next stage is depression. This is a time in which a person feels the loss of their loved one and may pull inward. They might be less social or isolate themselves more than usual. Testing is the other stage that was added later. It's the time where we begin to look for alternative ways to deal with the grief. Finally, the last stage is acceptance. In acceptance, a person still feels the pain, but no longer resists or denies it. It's not unusual to jump around in the stages. You may feel shocked in the beginning, then depressed. Then, you may feel denial, before going back to shock. Next, you may go to depression again, or to bargaining. The progression of grief isn't linear or even circular. It's more of a scribble. Everyone experiences it in their own unique way. One way to help ourselves cope with grief is the dual process model, which was developed by Struba and Schutt in 1995. The dual process model describes 2 different ways of behaving because of grief. The first is loss-oriented, and the second is restoration-oriented. As someone grieves, they switch or oscillate between these 2 modes. This is why they named it the dual process model, because 2 different processes are happening. The loss-oriented process involves thoughts, feelings, actions, and events that remind you of your grief and pain. It may include thinking about missing your loved one, looking at photographs, or thinking about memories of them. This can bring up intense emotions such as sadness, loneliness, or anger. Restoration-oriented actions are daily life activities such as doing laundry, yard work, working out, tackling a new project, or even watching a funny TV show. Oscillation is a natural way to go back and forth between the two modes without realizing it. Maybe you watched a movie, and it distracted you from your grief. This restoration-oriented mode may help people regain some sort of normalcy in life. It's important to move, or oscillate between, loss-oriented and restoration-oriented modes. You can do your grief work in loss-oriented mode, so you can feel things and process. The restoration-oriented side will allow you to do your normal everyday life actions and coping. Don't compare yourself with other people. Remember that other people don't know how you feel, even if they've had a similar experience. Let yourself feel, and acknowledge your pain. Remember that you can talk to your friends and family members about how you feel. Also, you can seek some professional help from a therapist, a spiritual leader, or a doctor. Self-care is another important area to consider. You can make time for self-care through actions like taking some time off, going for a walk, going for a bicycle ride, reading a book, or taking a bubble bath. Here are some tips to assist others through grief. Ask if there is anything you can do to help them, or ways that you can be there for them. In terms of talking to them, you can listen and offer support, but do not make comments about people being in a better place, say it was God's will, or that God will never give you more than you can handle. You mean to help, but it may minimize the loss they've experienced. They also may have a different view on spirituality than you do. In closing, please remember that grief is unfortunately common, and that you are not alone. Our office can provide referrals and additional resources. More information is also available on our website. Grieving has no definite timeline. If you are having a harder time coping with loss, please seek help. If you have any questions, or would like to schedule an appointment with student counseling, please call us at 706-867-4402. Thank you.